I'm going to take a minute to explain how Geffen pulled off the AIDS attack. I can't tell you what it means. I can tell you what position he put me in. Hillary Clinton is guilty of this crime, and she has enacted a union mechanism to enforce her dishonesty, which is heaped in things like RFK's historic grievance stuff in defense of Israel and so on. The institutional mainstream that overlooks something like Gail Burson's script in the name of uh, camaraderie with our allies and so on. And Trumping to impute these actually came up with common cause and religious mysticism about virginity and so on. The root of their criminal mentality is that a child who was battered and neuroplasm implanted would be just another street urchin, white trash, who overdosed and it was his own worst enemy. And on top of that, they read off the bill of particulars about the letters for the only and exclusive purpose of saying that John Lennon was victimized. And he's more important not because he was a big leader of the drug and sex revolution, but because he was famous and wrote good music, and people prefer him to anyone else. And I've explained in another video how they use one size fits all. So it doesn't matter if there's one person at risk or there's several million people at risk or several million people affected or even afflicted, because they have one size fits all. So don't bother trying to save lives. Okay, well, when it comes to the letters, it's all bigotry towards a deaf person. They say I was deaf from natural causes, which is a lie. It's directly contradicted by the evidence. I was purposely and deliberately deafened. So the police say, well, the police were sick of crime, and so they took out a 12-year-old and deafened him with a gang who forced him to swallow nitroglycerin, dragged him through glass, tortured him, forced him on inhalants, forced him in stolen cars, took him for pedophile purposes to adult secret coves after beating his brains in, intoxicating what they kept calling it. And all of this is deliberate distortion. That either way they say it doesn't matter. It's not that one side or the other was wrong, but that both sides were right. In other words, if they purposefully deafened and tortured him, that's good. And if they didn't purposely deafen and torture him, that's no defense. But in reality, it's bigotry towards the deaf child because a deaf child sits and cannot understand what's going on. They kept saying, why don't you use a magnifying glass and look up the words? She just seemed smarter than me. What would I do if I identified her as an Israeli guerrilla? Go to the judge who was her best friend's mother. They'd say, get out of here. Go to Dr. Proctor, who has it in for me as a white and is protecting Fred Rogers and covers for Will Zell. They'd say, get out of here. So instead, what happened was, now, when it comes to couples cheating, research shows that 25% or 20% of men cheat on their partners, and another 10 to 15% of women cheat on their partners. Okay, the minority of partners cheat on each other. But I don't know how common it is for boyfriends to get dumped or girlfriends to get dumped. In Pittsburgh, it happened. You get picked up and used. And you can't make ends meet, you have to sleep somewhere. Girl says you make her happy for a while, that's what happens. Maybe it would be better if it did, or if these things were discussed. But what they did instead was they kidnapped and they tortured me, and then they made clear that this homicidal spree is an agency who has it in for everybody. 2 times on the Virgin Mary. And instead of trying to investigate properly, they said Lenin is more important than that, and all of Lenin's friends defend them. And they didn't care that that's hocus pocus. That's what Geffen and Hillary Clinton did. And it's all based on, Miles Kirshner's, pushing marijuana on somebody who didn't have any friends, who was deaf, who was trying to come to grips with a life that was going to be deaf and marginalized. Turns out they were pushing me into the gas chamber for extermination purposes. Well, I didn't even remember. I had such a comatose amnesia from being beaten and tortured and gassed. When I opened the letter, it was all neurobehavioral neurobehavioral mystery. When I couldn't open the letter until I found the neuroplasm. When I opened the letter and read it, I went into seizures. In other words, they censored my ability to understand what happened through neurological intervention. And according to these psychopaths in Seattle, Washington, I'm to blame for not understanding something that they did that with. And so they let them get away with the bonus attack. It's called building momentum, they say. Poison them in the mouth. I never did anything like that to any of them. I was mingling because I got the idea that some agency was pulling this. And it was to protect these. They never returned the favor. Never once did any of those people, those terrible, cruel, sadistic, twisted, lying people in Seattle, ever once return the favor.